The night everything changed. On the quiet morning of February 1st, 2026, something happened in the peaceful Catalina foothills that would shake an entire community. Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old woman who had lived in the same home for decades, vanished without a trace. But this was not a disappearance without clues. Investigators quickly discovered a small but extremely important detail. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker application suddenly disconnected from her phone. That single digital signal told investigators something critical. Nancy was being moved. Either her phone was taken away, the signal was manually disabled, or she was physically moved beyond the Bluetooth range of her device. No matter which explanation is correct, the result is the same. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie was no longer safely inside her home. Then, another clue appeared. At 2:36 a.m., only 8 minutes later, a security camera located about 2.5 miles from Nancy's house captured a mysterious car driving through the neighborhood. When investigators measured the distance between the two locations, the result was chilling. The drive takes exactly 6 minutes. That means if Nancy was taken at 2:28 a.m., a vehicle leaving her neighborhood could appear on that camera at precisely the time recorded, which is exactly what happened. Local authorities confirmed publicly that the timing matched their investigative timeline. The FBI also confirmed the match. And then something strange happened. Silence. Despite having 10,000 hours of surveillance footage, cell tower records, and license plate reader data, the FBI has not revealed any details about that vehicle. To experienced investigators, that silence means something very specific. It usually means the evidence is extremely important. Because when the FBI stays quiet, it often means they are protecting a case that is still being built. And that mysterious car at 2:36 a.m. may be the key that unlocks everything.
The invisible vehicle. The vehicle captured on camera that night did not immediately stand out. In fact, it looked ordinary, almost forgettable. But investigators know that sometimes the most ordinary objects are chosen very deliberately. Retired NYPD detective Pat Brone reviewed the surveillance footage and concluded that the vehicle was likely a Kia Soul, a compact crossover vehicle known for being extremely common on American roads. At first glance, that might seem unimportant, but that may actually be the point. A Kia Soul is not flashy, it does not attract attention, it blends easily into everyday traffic. At 2:30 in the morning, a sleepy neighbor glancing out the window would likely ignore it completely, and that kind of invisibility can be extremely useful for someone trying to avoid attention. Investigators also noticed something else about the vehicle. The rear seats of a Kia Soul can fold down, creating a cargo space large enough to transport a person, especially someone elderly or physically weak. According to former FBI analyst Tracy Walder, items visible in the suspect's backpack appear consistent with what investigators call a transport kit. These items include materials like zip ties and tape, tools commonly used for restraint and containment. This does not look like a robbery, it looks like preparation. Preparation suggests planning, and planning suggests someone who studied the victim beforehand. The route the vehicle took also raises questions. The road where the car was seen connects to East River Road, which leads in several different directions across northern Tucson. One direction heads south toward the city center, another heads west toward residential neighborhoods, another leads north toward Oro Valley, and the final direction leads east into isolated desert areas. Each direction represents a possible escape route, and each route connects to different people involved in the investigation, which is why investigators believe the driver likely knew the area extremely well. This was not someone randomly passing through the neighborhood. This was someone who already knew exactly where those roads would lead.
The last person to see her alive. Every major investigation eventually focuses on one crucial question: who was the last person to see the victim alive? In Nancy Guthrie's case, that person was Tommaso Cioni. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Cioni drove Nancy home and dropped her off at her front door at approximately 9:48 p.m. Security cameras show the garage door opening shortly afterward. He waited until she safely entered the house before driving away. That makes him the last confirmed person to see Nancy alive. But what happened next remains a mystery. Nearly 4 hours later, at 1:47 a.m., Nancy's doorbell camera was suddenly interfered with. Investigators believe this is the moment when someone approached the house under the cover of darkness. Between 9:50 p.m. and 1:47 a.m. lies a critical window of time, a period investigators have studied from the very beginning. Publicly, authorities stated that family members had been cleared, but in criminal investigations, the word cleared can have multiple meanings.
It often means that there is currently not enough evidence to file charges. It does not necessarily mean investigators have stopped examining the evidence. One detail continues to attract attention. Federal investigators returned to search the residence of Cioni and his wife 5 separate times. 5 visits during an active investigation is not routine. Each search typically represents a specific evidentiary objective. Investigators rarely return to the same location repeatedly unless they believe additional evidence may still exist. At the same time, behavioral analysts have noted another unusual detail. For more than 38 days, Cioni has not made a single public statement regarding Nancy's disappearance. In cases involving missing family members, relatives are often visible, emotional, and publicly pleading for help. Silence, however, can sometimes indicate that someone has been advised to remain cautious while an investigation unfolds. But silence alone does not prove guilt. It simply raises more questions. And in this case, investigators had another name to examine.
A second name appears. The second name that entered the investigation was Dominic Evans. Evans first appeared in public reports after court records revealed a criminal history connected to his name, including charges related to burglary and theft. He later gave an interview explaining that he had met Nancy Guthrie only once, years earlier at a family gathering. According to Evans, investigators interviewed him for about 40 minutes early in the investigation. His alibi placed him at home with his wife and children on the night Nancy disappeared. Phone data reportedly supported this account. At this point, Evans has not been charged or officially named as a suspect, but investigators have still examined certain details. For example, the FBI described the individual seen on Nancy's porch as a man between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build and dark facial hair.
Evans' documented physical description falls within that range. Another detail noticed in infrared footage was a possible marking or tattoo on the suspect's wrist. If confirmed, such a feature could allow investigators to quickly include or exclude individuals from consideration. But perhaps the most important connection is historical. Evans and Tommaso Cioni have reportedly been friends for nearly 19 years. Their friendship began in 2007 after they met through a local advertisement for musicians. They later formed a band and remained close for many years. Over nearly 2 decades of friendship, information about family members, addresses, routines, and daily habits could easily be shared through normal conversation. Investigators often refer to this as incidental knowledge. It does not require direct interaction with a victim. It simply accumulates over time through proximity and familiarity. Which means the investigation now had 2 individuals connected by a long friendship, both connected to the same geographic area, and both linked to the timeline investigators were studying.
The evidence that may reveal the truth. While speculation continues publicly, investigators are quietly building a case using forensic science. One of the most important pieces of evidence is DNA. 2 separate DNA profiles have reportedly been collected in connection with the crime scene. One sample came from a glove found roughly 2 miles from Nancy's home. Another sample was recovered from inside the residence. Both samples are currently being analyzed. One of the most powerful tools investigators now use is forensic genetic genealogy.
This technique compares unknown DNA profiles with large genealogy databases used by people researching their family history. Even if the suspect never submitted their own DNA, a distant relative may have. That allows investigators to build a family tree and gradually narrow the possibilities. Just one relative in a database can be enough to begin identifying a suspect. Meanwhile, investigators are also analyzing cell tower data, vehicle registrations, and the enormous archive of surveillance footage collected during the investigation. More than 10,000 hours of video are being reviewed frame by frame. At some point, all of these elements, the car, the DNA, the phone data, and the genealogy results, will converge. When that happens, investigators will no longer rely on speculation. They will have a name supported by evidence. Nancy Guthrie has now been missing for more than a month. She is 84 years old, she has a pacemaker, and she disappeared from the home she lived in for nearly 50 years. Someone planned this, someone studied her routine, and someone drove away from that house at 2:36 a.m. But evidence does not stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, the facts catch up with the truth. And when they do, the silence surrounding this case will finally end.